Shalom, and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of a Shabbat sermon with Dr. Erica Rothblum.
Earlier this month, I was driving down Robertson Boulevard, and I saw a little boy, maybe 4 or 5 years old at the most, holding the hand of a man who was in his 40s or 50s. The man had a white cane, and it was clear that he was blind, and this little boy was guiding him step by step over the cracked and uneven sidewalk. It was a moment that made me slow my car and watch, even amidst Tuesday afternoon traffic, because it's so rare to see such explicit love. Not love as sentiment or emotion, but love as action. And as I think about our world right now, I believe the book of Devarim is calling on each of us to be that boy. Throughout the whole book of Devarim, we're explicitly commanded to love, again and again in different forms. In Parshat Ekev, we read the commandment to love the Lord your God. Later in Parshat Nitzavim, Moshe charges the people, choose life so that you and your offspring may live by loving the Lord your God, heeding his commandments, holding fast to him. Elsewhere, Moshe reminds us to love the stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt, and insists that we open our hands to the poor rather than hardening our hearts. In other words, over and over, love is not a feeling. Devarim teaches that love is a way of living. Love is seen in commitment and empathy and loyalty and justice. And Micha Goodman, a senior fellow at the Shalom Hartman Institute, helps us to see how radical of an idea this is. He argues that in Devarim, Moshe is not only calling on individuals to be loving, but laying out a vision for an entire society built on love. For example, in Shemot, the commandment about Shabbat is about rest. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, and the seventh day he rested. But in Devarim, the emphasis shifts, so that your male and female servant may rest as you do. Remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God freed you from there. Shabbat in Devarim is not only about imitating God's rest, it's about creating dignity for the vulnerable, collapsing hierarchies, loosening our grip on control. In the same way, whereas Shemot describes the Exodus as a story of miracles, plagues, seas splitting, God's mighty hand, in Devarim, Moshe retells the Exodus as a story of responsibility. Having been liberated, Israel must learn how to treat others. You too must love the stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. Experiencing these miracles is about cultivating sensitivity. Having once been powerless, Israel must now become a people who protect the powerless. These are the lessons the Israelites must carry with them into the promised land if they are to create a holy society. Moshe's project in Devarim is ultimately a reorientation of what it means to be God's people. It takes the great symbols of the Torah, Shabbat, the Exodus, the covenant, and retells them not as just moments of divine spectacle, but as lessons in human responsibility. Shabbat is not only about God's rest, it's about giving rest to those who have none. The Exodus is not only about miracles, it's about remembering what it feels like to be powerless so that you'll protect the powerless. In other words, Moshe's teaching that the strength of a society is not measured by domination or displays of power, but by the compassion it extends to the most vulnerable. And if that is true for nations, it is just as true for us, which is why I become more and more convinced that conflicts are not solved in anger. Anger can silence, it can intimidate, it can overpower for a time, but it cannot transform. The only power strong enough to heal what is broken in families, in communities, in nations is love. Or as Melissa Etheridge shared at her concert this summer, if you want to see more love in the world, you must give more love. That's the vision Moshe set before the Israelites, and that's the vision we inherit. It's no accident that we're reading these words in this season. Shabbat Shuvah is about return. And perhaps Devarim is reminding us that the return God asks of us is not through guilt or fear, but through love. Too often we think of tshuva only as beating our chests, as berating ourselves for our mistakes, for obsessing over where we fell short. But Moshe's words invite us to shift the frame, to understand return as an act of love, love of God, love of others, love of ourselves. In thinking about returning to our relationship with God, it's easy to imagine that relationship as driven by fear. The liturgy of these days can stir in us fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of not being enough. But Devarim paints a very different picture. As the Torah teaches, to love the Lord your God, to walk in all God's ways, to hold fast to him. Loving God is not about trembling in dread, but about acting with compassion and justice and humility. Maybe the most powerful way we love God is by bringing abundance into the world. Love for our neighbors, for the stranger, for those who test our patience. So what if instead of beating our chests for the ways we fell short, we use this season to renew our covenant with God through a commitment to live a life of love in action, to love those who God created? Returning to our communities through love asks something different of us. Communities are messy. People will disappoint us, say the wrong thing, let us down. But the Torah insists that it is here, in the hardest moments, that love is most transformative. To return to one another with love is not to gloss over hurt, but to choose generosity over judgment, patience over resentment. It's the commitment to keep showing up for each other, even when it is inconvenient or uncomfortable. And returning to ourselves through love may be the hardest tshuva of all. It is so easy to turn inward with harsh judgment, to see only our flaws, to believe that if we punish ourselves enough, we will change. But real tshuva is not born of self-contempt. It's born of compassion. Returning to ourselves through love means acknowledging our mistakes while believing that we're still worthy of growth and repair and joy. It means remembering that we're created in God's image and treating ourselves with the same kindness God commands us to extend to others. And so on this Shabbat tshuva, I want to offer that tshuva is not only about turning from sin, that actually what our world needs from us right now is to turn toward love. Love of God, love of others, love of ourselves. And I think that this message can be really easy to dismiss. Love is often perceived as fluffy or sentimental. We live in a world that often dismisses love as a weakness, where strength is measured in war, in aggression, in fighting. And yet history teaches us that this kind of strength never lasts. It can subdue for a time, but it cannot redeem. And there have always been voices who refused that equation, insisting that real strength lies elsewhere. Martin Luther King spoke extensively about love as the most powerful force we have. Not sentimental love, but agape, a selfless, redemptive love that reaches even toward those who oppose us. In his sermon, Loving Your Enemies, Dr. King told the story of Abraham Lincoln and Edwin Stanton. When Lincoln was running for president, Stanton mocked him endlessly, calling him names, ridiculing his appearance. Yet when Lincoln was elected, he appointed Stanton as Secretary of War, not because Stanton had been kind, but because he was the best person for the job. And over time, Lincoln's act of trust transformed Stanton. By the time Lincoln was assassinated, it was Stanton who eulogized him, declaring with tears, "Now he belongs to the ages." Dr. King reflected, if Lincoln had hated Stanton, Stanton would have gone to his grave hating Lincoln. But because Lincoln chose love, Stanton's heart was changed. Hate destroys the hater as well as the hated. But if you love your enemies, you will discover that at the very root of love is the power of redemption. And this is exactly the empathy our world is starving for. Empathy does not mean agreement. It does not erase responsibility. But it does insist that even those we consider our enemies or our opponents are still human beings, created in God's image. If we disagree with someone's politics, if we other the suffering of another human, if we lose the ability to see humanity on the other side of a conflict, then we've lost something essential of our own humanity. Empathy is not weakness, it's the beginning of the world's healing. In this, King's voice echoes Moshe's in Devarim. As the Israelites prepared to enter the land, Moshe knew that they would become powerful and that power can corrupt. And so his charge was clear. Use your power with empathy. Transform memory into sensitivity, ritual into justice, strength into love. Both King and Moshe remind us that real change, whether in a society or in a soul, does not come through fear or force, but through love that is courageous enough to heal and enduring enough to last. Ultimately, love is the most radical strength we have. And while King and Moshe both remind us that love can change nations, the truth is we also see how desperately people crave love in the smallest, most ordinary corners of life. A beautiful example of this surfaced in the Dad Project that went viral this year. It started when Rosie Pollack made a simple TikTok about her dad, Buzz, who had just retired. He had a PhD. He wasn't sure what to do next. She mentioned that he had written her a letter every single day through camp, college, and adulthood, and asked, almost as a joke, if anyone wanted a letter from her dad. She expected a few responses. Instead, thousands of requests poured in from people whose fathers had died, from those who had fathers who had never shown up, from kids who had never once heard the words, "I'm proud of you." Now, they had to recruit other dads, and Buzz and a handful of these other dads wake up before dawn to write letters to strangers across the world. They tell corny jokes, they share everyday stories about pets and the sandwiches they had for lunch, and most importantly, they remind people that they are seen, that they matter, that someone is proud of them. And the responses are extraordinary. People cry at their kitchen tables when they read them. Some tuck them away with their most treasured family mementos, because even a letter from a stranger can feel like love. And why did this strike such a chord? Because people are starving for love. Not sentimental love, but steady, simple, actionable love. The kind of love Devarim demands. The kind of love that boy showed guiding the older man across the sidewalk. If we can each do this, even in small ways, then our tshuva this year will be real. Tshuva is not just what happens in this sanctuary or in the machzor. It's what happens when we leave here and decide to live differently. It's the love we bring when returning to God, to one another, to ourselves. Because anger can feel really satisfying for a moment, but it cannot heal. Fighting can silence the voices we don't want to hear, but it doesn't change hearts or create durable peace. Anger and fighting only work in the short term and usually at great cost. The only way conflicts end in families, in communities, in nations is when love breaks through. So I want to invite each of us to choose one act of love to carry into this year, not in the abstract, but in the everyday. Reaching out to someone you've grown distant from and beginning again with kindness. Offering compassion in a conversation where normally you'd hold on to judgment. Choosing generosity when frustration would be easier. And when you face someone you see as an opponent or as an enemy, reaching inside for empathy, trying to find their humanity. This is not soft or sentimental work. It is hard work, and our world needs it. Our world is starving for love, not for more anger, not for more judgment, not for more power, but deep and enduring love. So may this be our tshuva, to bring love as a way of living in our families and in our community and in our hearts. And when we wonder what that looks like, just remember that little boy on Robertson. Reach out your hand to help someone else, step by step, safely across the cracks.
You've been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast website or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information on Temple Beth Am, Los Angeles, please visit www.tbala.org.